All right, this video is for Algebra 1, Track 1. It is Monday, September 15th, and my apologies for a little bit of chaos at the beginning of class today, but I think we've got it squared away. Okay, you should have taken your axiom quiz, everybody that's been in class. Remember I told you you just had to match them up, so hopefully that went well for you, and I will grade those when I get back tomorrow. At this time, you need to be working on the mid-chapter self-test. Here are the first 10 problems. I'm just going to talk through them and then make sure Mrs. Carroll will pause the video to make sure everybody's completed 1 through 10, and then the next slide I have the answers for you. But I just wanted to make sure that you're up to par so far in this chapter on greater than or less than numbers on the number line, the opposite of integers as well as fractions, evaluating the absolute value, evaluating the opposite of the absolute value. Here we're adding some positive and negative sign numbers, and here's even a little bit of that with fractions. Remember this one right here, number 9, what you would want to do is convert them all to a common denominator. So 1/2 and 3/2 and negative 3/4, negative 1/2 plus 3/2 plus negative 3/4. They all need a common denominator to be able to add them. And then here is adding some sign numbers with some decimals. And so Mrs. Carroll can pause the video just to make sure that everybody has completed numbers 1 through 10. And the next slide I will explain them. All right, on numbers 1 through 10, you should have gotten -4 for number 1, -1/2 for number 2. Think about the number line. 1/2 would be, -1/2 would be between 0 and -1, and -1/3 is a little bit closer to 0. So that's why -1/2 would be less than -1/3. The opposite of a -6 is a +6. The opposite of 3/2 is a -3/2. The absolute value of a -4, which typically we would have the sign, the straight lines on either side, but even in Word version you should know that the opposite or the absolute value of -4 would be a +4. But then in number 6, when you are asked to evaluate the opposite of the absolute value of a -3, you should have actually still got that negative in front of 3 and 1/3. So this would be one that would look like this: -3 and the absolute value of -3 and 1/3. Okay, and then that's the one where that when they say the opposite of that, they put the absolute value sign in front of the absolute value. The negative sign in front of the absolute value. So that's why your final answer is negative, because the opposite is outside of the absolute value sign. All right, then 7 would be 2. 8 would be -4. I'm sure those of you who practiced a lot last week are getting those down really well now. Here was number 9. If you change -1/2 to -2/4, and if you change 3/2 to 6/4, and then you already have -3/4 with the denominator 4. The denominator then is 4, and you simply add your integers of -2 and 6, be -2/4 plus 6/4 minus 3/4 plus a -3/4. So when you go to add fractions, even with sign numbers, you keep the denominator the same once you convert them all to common denominators. And then to find this numerator of 1, you just added -2 plus 6 plus a -3. And then finally, number 10, you should have gotten 0.6. Okay, so just check your answers. Make sure you understand how to get each one of those. Those will be on a quiz further in the chapter. All right, then finish numbers 11 through 14. Those all had decimals. And my recommendation is to take, for instance, in number 11, add these 2 positive decimal numbers together and then subtract your negative. And in number 12, add the 2 negative decimals together. And then add your 8.6 positive decimal. For number 13, add the positive decimals together, then subtract 2.2. And for 14, add your positive decimals together and subtract the 10.5. So Mrs. Carroll, if you just check to make sure everybody has 11 through 14 completed. and then pause the video until everybody's finished, and then you can advance for the answers. Okay, I tried to make sure these were right. I don't have my book at home, and so in between trying to care for a sick child, I've tried to get these going. So just check your answers here: 3.4, -7.7, and 5.4, and 0 for the last one. And actually, I do have a version of the book, so let me just check additional answers in the back as well. And you can be checking those, and you can pause the video if you have questions on those. Okay, yes, they were all correct. All right, the next slide. The remaining answers for the mid-chapter self-tests, 15 through 22. I think what I'll do is I'll go over those tomorrow. And so if you haven't completed the mid-chapter self-test, we can finish those in class tomorrow. But hopefully, so far, numbers 1 through 14 make sense for you, even those who were gone last week because of sickness. And I will get with you 3, Jonathan, Grant, and Haley, and we'll get everything fixed up once everybody else is well. All right? All right, then look at your matrices worksheet. I thought I'd just talk through these with you because I want you to finish these for homework tomorrow. I'm just going to explain them. Okay, number 1, you are these are equal. Their dimensions are the same. This matrix right here has 3 rows and 2 columns. 3 rows and 2 columns. So all you're going to do is add corresponding entries: 3 and 0, 6 and -1, -1 and 6, -3 and 0, -5, 2, -1, 3. And your resulting matrix is going to be a 3 by 2 as well. In number 2, you're going to subtract. And so 2 ways you can look at it. Same thing, the dimensions are the same, so we can go ahead and subtract. And you take this first entry right here, -5, and you subtract a -6. 2 minus a -5. Let me get a pen here, and I can go over this one with you because a couple of you have been gone. So when we're doing matrices, you got to check your dimensions, make sure there are 2 rows and 3 columns, which there are. And when you go to subtract, take -5 and go -6. And so that's why we're going to have a -11 right here. Then we can do 4 minus 1, and we get a +3 right here. Now when we go to the second column, you're going to take 2 and you're going to subtract a -5, which is the same thing as adding 5. So 2 plus 5 is 7 right here. -2 minus 3 is a -5. -2 minus a -6 right here, and the opposite of a -6 is actually -2 plus 6. So we get a 4 right here. And then 0 minus a -3, or 0 plus 3. And that's how you get your resulting matrix. Actually, this matrix right here is the difference between these two matrices. Okay, and then right at the end on Friday, I was showing you about scalar multiples. All you do here is take this -5 and multiply it by all 6 numbers inside this matrix. And so then you will finish with a 2 by 3 matrix by multiplying all the numbers inside by -5. The same thing here. Multiply everything in this matrix by a -5. Multiplication. Those are called scalar multiples, and we'll go over the answers for 1 through 4 tomorrow. Okay, number 5 right here, do the same thing we've already talked about. This is a 1 row. It's a 1 by 2. Both matrices are 1 by 2, so the answer matrix will be a 1 by 2, and you just add the 2 corresponding entries together and you get a final answer. Number 5 is another scalar multiple. Just multiply both of these numbers by 5. Number 7 is a scalar multiple. All 4 numbers will be multiplied by a -5. Make sure you change the sign when you take them Negative 5 times a negative 2, that's going to be a positive 10. And 5 times all of these. Here, really, this is what we're going to work on today. When you have a positive times a positive, obviously your product will be a positive. When you multiply a negative times a negative, most of you remember these sign rules, but in case you don't, you might need them for this worksheet. Negative times a negative will be a positive. And then if you have one negative and one positive, it doesn't really matter the order. The resulting number will be a negative. So whether it's negative times a positive or a positive times a negative, your product will be a -1. Negative. Okay, so for number 7 here, let me just illustrate using a negative number. So we're going to go -5 times a +1. So that is this one right here. Since it's a negative times a positive, your resulting product will be a negative number. So it's a -5. Then -5 times a -2. Both of them are negative. Negative times negative is a positive. So then you're going to have a positive 10. Okay, and then another negative times a negative is a positive 5. And then negative times a positive is a -10. So your resulting matrix is still a 1 by 4, but notice how our signs changed because we were multiplying by a negative number. So you want to apply that rule to anything that you're multiplying. Okay, right here when you multiply, you're going to have 4 terms. And so we're going to multiply numbers with numbers. We're getting a little bit ahead, a little bit out of order of multiplication, but I thought I'd at least show it to you. It's not too difficult. Right here, when you multiply the term -2u, -2u times 7u, what you're going to do there is you multiply your coefficients together, -14, and since it's u times u, it will be u squared. Ew, that's a 2. The first entry will be a -14u squared. Okay, for the second one, notice you're going to do the same thing. Coefficient of -2 times a +3 will be a -6. And then the u and the w are not common letters, so you're just going to make one complete term and just put them all right next to each other. If I can draw it. Okay, so we get -6u times w to the second power because -2 times 3 is a -6, then the u, then the w squared. Now the next term, -2u times 5u, you would get a -10u squared. And the last one is just -2 times 5 will be a -10u. So that one's a little more advanced. That one's a little more advanced right there, but hopefully that makes sense. You should be able to do number 10 and number 11. Number 12, you're just going to write them right because we're adding. You're just going to write, like for this first entry, it's going to be actually -4n plus 4 because we can't add those two terms together. They're not common terms. So you will actually just leave it like that for entry number 1, that first row, first column entry. For this one right here, -2n plus 3m, you will just do the same thing. Leave it all written out. And then -2n plus 3m. This one's a little more advanced as well. And then right here, n plus m plus a -5, we'll just have to write all of those out. N plus m minus 5. You just leave it all like that. Okay, and then the last one, -4n plus 0, would just be a -4n. So that's kind of a unique looking matrix right there, but it is really how you would do. That's a little more on a Algebra 2 level, but hopefully you understand it. Okay, you should be able to do 13 right here. 14, that's more at an advanced level, so do your best there. We can talk about that one tomorrow. 15, just multiply each of the entries here by 4c, and it will be, some of them will have a number like here. Anything times 0 will be 0 and 0, but then multiply 4c times 6 and 4c times 3a. Multiply the 4 times the 3 and the c times the a. Okay, and then just do your best on number 16 as well. And then these right here, these are all going to be at a more advanced level. So 17 through 22, I'll leave really 16 through 22, I'll leave those as optional. We can get back to working on those tomorrow. So hopefully that helps you, and at least get through number 15 on this worksheet. And Lord willing, I'll be back in class tomorrow, and we'll be able to pick it up from here. All right, we'll see you then. Thanks.